You might remember a young lady called Uyinene Mrwetyana, a 19-year-old who was sadly killed in Cape Town. It was in August of 2019. Her murder really brought into sharp focus the scourge of gender-based violence in the country. A commemorative lecture in her honor is currently taking place at the Kingswood College, that's in the Eastern Cape. And speaking now is the Education Minister in Siviwe Gwarube. Let's listen in.
If we refuse to be erased, we honor people like Uyinene, and we honor every woman whose life was stolen too soon. And so I say to you, step into classrooms with your intelligence. Step into boardrooms with your authority. Take up space even when they say you're too ugly. Take up space even when they say you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too loud, you're too feminine, you're not feminine enough. Take up space anyway. Weaponized criticism designed to control you must never find you cowering. It must find you confident. It must find you ready. It must find you ready to take on the world. And so take up space and let the world feel your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, as government, we have a duty to ensure that our policies and practices protect young women and all children in South Africa. We must strengthen GBV education in schools, creating safer places of learning environments. And we must work across sectors to tackle gender-based violence at its roots. But it is not the fight of government alone. It is the fight for every single South African. It is a fight for men to take the responsibility to hold one another accountable. It is a fight for institutions, for schools, for universities, for workplaces, to create environments where women feel safe, respected, and valued. It is a fight for all of us to say, no, not anymore. And that is why it's important to introduce the element of how do we bring the boy child into the conversation. Because for too long, ladies and gentlemen, the conversation has been to say to women, how do you keep yourself safe? How do you prevent yourself from being raped? How do you prevent yourself from being killed? As though women are the very perpetrators of those violences against them. They are not. It is the men and the women and the boys that you raise, that you live with every single day, who are the perpetrators of these crimes. And so in the conversation around gender-based violence, we cannot leave young women, young men, and boys behind in the conversation. I said to the young ladies and gents that I met a little bit earlier on this morning, that when they ask me what is it that we can do, I challenge them to change the culture. We can change the culture in our country. One of violence and one of where women don't feel safe, we can change it. But we have to make the decisions ourselves. We have to decide to be the change that we want to see. And we have to call out problematic behavior when we see it. And as young men, you can lead the charge against this cultural change that we need. You can be the ones who call out your friends, your dads, and other males who are in your presence and say, not in our name. We are no longer going to be the monsters that these women in this country have to run away from. And I truly believe it can start with all of you. I look at you today and I truly believe that you can be the ones who start this change. Who can start the change of saying, it ends here and no longer with us. And so in closing, I want to remind the learners here today that you are more than capable. You are powerful and you are worthy as you are, and you are here for a reason. Do not let fear hold you back. Do not let the dangers of this world dim your brilliance. Take up space, walk into the rooms like you belong there, because you do. Speak up, demand better, challenge the world to be as fearless as you are. And I can say to you that as a minister who's standing before you, I take that kind of role extremely seriously. Because yes, I can ask you to take up space. Yes, we can ask your headmaster to create a culture of safety in your schools. But we have to also have leaders who are responsive to the scourge in our country, who are going to say what more can we do to not only be responsive to once the crime has happened, but what more can we do to rally South Africans along with us to make sure that we create a culture across the country that is one of safety for women in particular. And for children, ladies and gentlemen, they are the most vulnerable members of our society. And perhaps the reason that their interests are not always front of mind is because they're not unionized, or they are not the ones who are old enough to speak up. But they are the most vulnerable members of our society, and it is incumbent on all of us, and all of us who are leading in various ways, to say, how do we stand up for children? And so the story of Ucwecwe and many other children in this country has devastated me, but it's also saying it's spurring us into action. We have to do better. We have to show up for children, and we have to show up for all of you. I'm excited to see what you're going to do with your lives. And I hope that stories like these are not ones that make you be shackled with fear, but that they spur you to say, in the memory of somebody once like me who walked the halls of the school, I am going to make sure that I make a difference. And so I really hope that you can hold the memory of Uyinene in your hearts, and you can make sure that not only is that memory there, but it's the one that really spurs you into action, to not just for you, but to be a responsible citizen of our country. And so honor Uyinene not just by remembering her, but by living your life fearlessly, and let her name not be forgotten. We will not let her story be in vain. And that's why, Mama Notata, I'm here today, because I want to say we will not let your baby girl's name go in vain. She will not be forgotten. We will use her memory to make sure that all of us take on the mantle to fight the scourge of gender-based violence in our country. Ubhlungu, I know, but her life will not be in vain, because it is the catalytic moment in which we all realized that something must be done. And so to the young women and men of King's College, go boldly. Young women of South Africa, go and walk with the knowledge that you are the heartbeat of this nation, and never, ever stop making your mark. Thank you very much.
All right, so there you have it, live visuals from Kingswood College. It's an institution, a high school in the Eastern Cape, where Uyinene Mrwetyana also matriculated back in the year 2000 or so. In fact, it was in 2018. And of course, in case you missed it, Uyinene Mrwetyana was the 19-year-old who was sadly killed at a post office in Claremont in Cape Town. In fact, it's an instance of gender-based violence that's said to have shifted the national consciousness of the country around how we think of this kind of violence and the scourge specifically on women. In fact, in the protest that followed, I remember many women in the country speaking about how it's unsafe to even go to the post office in a country like ours. And so since then, there's been all manner of initiatives to try shine a spotlight on the issue, including the Uyinene Mrwetyana Foundation and this memorial lecture, which is taking place now at her former high school, where the minister today has given the keynote address. Siviwe Gwarube essentially giving out a clarion call for girls to continue taking up space. She's also spoken about the need to involve the boy child in the conversations, who she reckons could play an incredibly important part in shifting the culture around this. And of course, that opens up all manner of discussions around masculinity and the way in which it feeds into gender-based violence. The minister saying we have to show up for children, citing the most recent case around the 7-year-old girl, Kwekwe, who we understand was allegedly raped last year in Matatiele at a school that is now facing calls to close down because of how they handled that issue. In fact, we're expecting to speak to Kosas about that sometime in the morning as we continue watching reaction to that particular incident. But it's a shattering story as we go back to that moment when those details started being fleshed out, the way in which Uyinene was killed and just how brazen that particular crime was. She would have been just 25 years old this year.